Then you introduce yourself in all your fullness.
All right, my full name is Marlene Dee Gray Potoura. And I just want to let you know, all know that my namesake is actually from New Zealand. She used to work with my dad back in Sopas in Enga, Wabek, at Sopas Adventist Hospital. So I'm named after a New Zealander. Yes, so let me just brief you on what drew me to this group here. I liked what I saw when I came across First Nations, the group there. It was the phrase, the fact that together we are stronger. You see, together we are stronger. And it kind of, I wanted to know more what this group was doing, and then and I connected. All right, and then she found out about this anthology that I did with my students. But firstly, I'll just give a background of my writing. I'm from Bougainville, and you've all heard about the Bougainville Civil War. And before the Civil War happened, I grew up in the village, you see, and I was drawn to our world in the village. I always sat around like village bonfires, listening to my grandparents telling our myths and legends, and in PNG we say, and in Bougainville, tumbuna stories, like stories from grandparents that has been passed down for generations. So between that, I always like listening to reading and stories from Uncle Arthur's bedtime stories because of the Christian background I come from. So I was brought up in two worlds. And during the Bougainville War, I came out, just to make everything short, I came out to Papua New Guinea. It was in 1993. All right, in 1993 I came out, and I couldn't cope in Papua New Guinea. I went through a really difficult time in Bougainville, and I found it really hard to cope in Papua New Guinea. And because during the crisis, a lot of my family members were assassinated, and my father was assassinated as well. And I found it really hard to cope. And then I would sit there and think of my days when I was growing up in Bougainville, and I decided that I would start to write. Yes, I would start to write, and everything just fall into place. So one of the first writing I did was a poem. I wrote a poem, and it's called When Rifles Rolled. All right, When Rifles Rolled, and then I wrote The Kindred's Revenge. And Commonwealth Writers chose me for the Commonwealth Writers group in Fiji, and I was there, and my poem was read in like a poetry slam, and everyone cried. Yeah, so I also had an interview with the breakfast show in Fiji because of that poem, When Rifles Rolled. Yeah, so from there on, I started, I said, oh, I can do this. And then the process of my healing came through my writing. Yeah, I kept on writing short stories. It just kind of became an everyday thing for me that I would write. Just kept on writing. Short stories just in a day I would write 3 short stories. And like they always say, don't annoy a writer. They will put you in a story and kill you. Yeah, so I got into the my short stories, they come from real experiences, but I kind of changed names and, get the story going. So that's how it all happened. And one of my stories got recognized. I think I sent it to this blog. It's called PNG Attitude and Friends. And I can remember it was called Bloody Sticker. And then they asked me to write. They said, hey, we really love your writing. Can you just keep on writing? So I just kept on writing for PNG Attitude, and every day there's a story. I had my own readers, and they would come, mostly Australians from here. They would come and comment, oh, this is really good, and I just kept on writing. And then I published my 2 first short story books. The first one was these 22 longs and shorts. I didn't bring it, it's there. And then the second one was emotionally famished. Yeah, emotionally famished, 22 of them. And then it just kept on going and going. That's how I started. So through the writing process, I became stronger, and I began to face what happened to me back in Bougainville in a different form, of course. Like mine was like short stories. Yeah, so that's how I got into writing, and it just continued on. Even when I went to university, I was just writing, and it just continued on, and then that's how I started.
And was your family a political family? Like, were they involved in political movement in a big way, or were they just caught up in the war that happened? Or would they discuss these things? How did you begin to formulate your own ideas about the politics of who you were?
Thank you, Anna. That's a really good question. My dad was a chief in Bougainville. He was a paramount chief in Bougainville. And what happened in Bougainville was that they suspected their own people, you see. And they thought that they were helping the Papua New Guinea soldiers from outside. So that was what happened to my dad. He was suspected of being a spy for Papua New Guinea, but actually he was not. So a lot of bad things happened in Bougainville, and it took me all these years to really come into terms of what really happened. I couldn't accept it. After I had my kids, it kind of, I kind of got everything together. I had somebody to love again, you see. I was very close to my father, and I was quite young when he was assassinated, but it took me all these years to come to terms with what happened. Yeah, so he was not even a political person, but he was just suspected of being a Papua New Guinea spy.
And how old were you when that happened?
I was around 22, 23. Yes, I was about that age.
Did you set out to write? Was it part of a healing process, or was it more coming out of your educational role as a teacher working with young ones?
I didn't know what to do with myself. I came out, I couldn't cope, and because of I just connected it to my, how I used to listen to stories back then, and to my grandparents talking about the spirit world. Like in Bougainville, we really believe in the trees and the land and things like that. So it kind of, I decided that even though I was in Papua New Guinea, I would connect back to my background and try to make it work for myself. And then that's how I just started writing. Like I needed to do something to get hold of myself. So that's just what I did. I started writing, and it all came out like that.
And the step from it being a healing process, obviously, and possibly an intellectual one too, to make sense of the war and what had happened, and to get it down on paper. So what made you decide then that to be published would also be a good idea for you?
I never thought of being published, you see. I think it came to me by chance. My writing was recognized, like I think I had some really good relevant things to say. So the first one was that when rifles rained, and then the next one was blood is thicker. So I just send it out, you know. So and then people just recognized my work, that I had a voice hidden in some of the short stories, and then they liked what I was doing.
So it's really interesting, because sometimes one powerful poem can actually, that's for the budding poets in the room, can actually encapsulate where you're actually going to head. One poem can be so explosive to others that you suddenly realise that you've actually got something very important to say. And when you read your poem about rifles, the room was in tears. Can you describe to us what that was like when you read it to that audience?
Well, Julie, I couldn't read it. So one of my friends read it. She's a Fijian. Her name is Mary. She read it. We were at this poetry slam. I still don't have the confidence to read it as from now. It was something that I had to write, and it was totally different from my writing, because I don't like poetry. I write short stories, but I teach the skills in poetry writing, but I don't see myself as writing poetry. I rather like do short stories. So, but this one just, it made a lot of people in tears. So she read it, and everybody was like, actually we were in a bar, like it was the Onyx bar, and like all the music stopped and everyone was like, oh wow, like maybe that was a wrong place to read the poem as well. Yeah, so that was what happened, and I got to know a lot of people in Fiji through my poem.
Yeah.
And then you know what? That poem just went ahead. It was chosen for Sandra's Best in India, and then it went on and it was chosen by International Humanitarian in New York, and they asked me to do a summary of my memoir, which I've written for the last 30 years, and I'm still in the process of like finalizing it because of some family issues that we need to sort out. And then they published my story in their book there. It was because of the poem that I wrote, yeah, When Rifles Rolled.
I find that a really extraordinary story because I had an experience not quite like that because I was already a playwright, but I read a poem at a writers' festival recently when it was just after the Me Too kind of period, and I'd written a poem describing every single time I'd been beaten up or assaulted or normally I don't write personal stuff. I'm not interested. Anyway, and this woman, she said, send me some poems, and I sent that was one of the poems. She said, I want you to read that poem. I said, no, I've never read that poem. It's too embarrassing. I'm not going to read that poem. She said, no, and she was on the stage. She said, there's the poem, Julie, we want you to read it. And I was like, with a microphone. And I read the poem, and people started to cry and clapped, and people stood up and clapped, and then a couple of women came up afterwards and threw their arms around me and said, thank you so much. But I was like a shaking wreck, because when you say I can't read that poem, that is the power of poetry. Yeah.
That's right.
So, short stories are easier, are they, for you?
Short stories are easier for me because I don't think they have that impact, because it was my poem that took me out there. And it really expresses how they got my father. They came in the morning and they got him, and the poem really expresses it, and how I had to run through the forest. And I still cannot read the poem. It's a very personal experience I had. So in Fiji, someone else read it for me. Yeah, and it's out there on the internet. You can just type When Rifles Rule and my full name, and it's just there. Yeah, so it's traveled around some blogs as well. Yeah, so I like short stories better.
Yeah, but the short story form is very difficult. I mean, I have attempted a few and I pretty well give up. I think they are so difficult, such a difficult form. I'd rather write a play, a novel or a poem, I really would. So how did you first decide that a short story form was going to work for you?
Actually, when I was in primary school, I always liked writing. I was always top of the list in like what we called back then written compositions, written expressions. I was, when I look back, I was always interested in writing. In high school, I won some awards as well, like writing awards, like written expressions and awards like that. So when I came out of Bougainville and I was through the healing process, writing short stories just like they came automatically to me. So then later I realized that it's my passion. It's something that I can do every day. Like some people, they really struggle to write short stories, but to me it just comes naturally. You can ask me to write about the chair and I'll do it. One of my short stories is called The Chair.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's in one of my 52 short stories. It's called The Chair. Yeah, and I've written, like most of my stories around people in the villages, Papua New Guinea, and it can be international stories as well. There's one titled Deeply Madly, and it's about mental illness in the Pacific Islands, and somebody who just walked the streets, like she used to work in the bank and then she just, so it's mostly to do with everyday people as well.
And would you agree with the idea that in order to write extraordinary stories or extraordinary poems, you have to have had an extraordinary life?
I totally agree with that. I've lived a really extraordinary life, you won't believe it. yes. I was in the war and then I came out. I'm a single parent. I brought up my kids all by myself. And my sister is here. She's helped me a lot to bring up the 2 kids. And then I've gone through some traumatic experiences as well. When we were living in another town, not Port Moresby, our house was on fire as well. And we got robbed how many times. So this one just kept on prompting me to write. Like, I'm just thinking, do all these things happening to me because I have to write short stories? Maybe, I don't know, but it's a big kind of bad omen that just keeps on happening. Things are always happening to me. Yeah.
I often find when I read not short stories or novels, and I'm reading them and I'm thinking, this is all made up. And I just sit there and I'm like going through the book like this and I'm thinking, this is just someone's imagination. None of it is actually lived or experienced or based on anything true. And I get quite frustrated because I find it's just kind of like fairy floss, you know. So when I hear about someone who's had an extraordinary life and is then writing stories, I'm much more interested to read because I know there's going to be veritas, there's going to be a truth and a heart in it. And why haven't you written a novel yet?
I have a novel that I started and it's gone like 15 years. Yeah, and it's...
Rebecca.
3 years.
Yes, and it's still there. I started it and then I went to Fiji. It involves half of the Pacific Islands as well. And this novel has like a background in Bougainville as well. So it's just been there, it's been going, and maybe one day I will publish it. And I've written a lot of children's stories as well. I write between being a short story writer and a children's writer as well. So I've written a lot of children's stories. And there's a novel as well that's completed. But I need to find the time to really read through, and then maybe another islander who can read through my work and not change anything. And we can kind of get it with the publishing bit. So when I started, can I just say something on this? When I started writing and like my stories were like, people started reading them and commenting on them on that blog. And they just say, keep them coming, keep them coming, keep them coming. So I just kept on writing. And somebody told me, you can publish your stories. And I said, okay. So the first short story book, it's called Marlene's 21 Longs and Shorts. So this Australian person, his name is Phil. He used to work in Papua New Guinea before. He told me to compile the stories together and he helped me read through them and he published the book for me. So I didn't bring it because today I'm to talk about this. So I'm just giving a background on what I've done. And the second one is Emotionally Famished. So that one has 22 short stories again. So I've got the first one and the second book of 22 short stories. That's my number 22. It's climbing up. The next one I have is like 50 short stories.
You're so prolific.
Yeah, they call me a prolific writer in Papua New Guinea. Yeah. So let me just tell you about what I do. So I decided that, my stories are really loved all around PNG by students in school as well, because I'm a teacher as well. And mostly the youngster stories, I wrote them for my kids when they were growing up. And then some other kids read them and they liked them. Some friends, and then Kid Jackson started posting them on his blog and everyone liked them. So I decided that, I should get them published. And then I went, that time they had created space on Amazon. So I signed up, and then I started publishing my own books and I order them and I sell them to schools in Papua New Guinea. So what I do in PNG, I don't write for anybody else. Like, I'm not in any group. I teach young people at a school and I get them all involved in writing and reading my stories as well. Like in class, I get them to read my stories and analyze and review them, and that's how I get feedback from them. Sometimes I change my names just to, keep them reading, so they wouldn't stop and say, wow, you know how they are. Did you write this? Yeah, so sometimes I just change my name just to see what they have to say.
Yes.
Yeah, so what they have to say. There's one story that I usually give out. It's called, what is it called? I can't remember now. You know, I'm getting old and my memory is really...
Stories.
Yes, there's so many of them, yes. So that's what I usually do in schools. Like in Papua New Guinea, I can say there's so many people who write, but I don't really associate with them. I associate with the young people I teach.
Right.
Yeah, because through them, I give them my stories to read, and then they like them, you see. So I just go ahead and publish and then give them to schools to read. Yes, so that's what.
And do you make a living?
Not really. I'm a teacher. I make a living out of, you know, my regular job. Yeah, but what we do, like the school I work at now, that they are really interested in my work as well. So when they order my books, and then I just sell them, or their library is full of my books as well. So they kind of being really supportive, and that keeps me going. Like I love what I do with young people, helping them to write in Papua New Guinea.
And have you found in the last, say, 5 to 10 years, because I was a teacher for a long time too, a difference in especially young teenagers with their mobile phones? I have to ask you this question. Does it drive you crazy, or do you have some nice strict rules that actually worked?
You mean at school?
Yeah, with the mobile phone.
All right, I work in a really strict school. Yeah, it's a private school, so mobile phones are not allowed.
Right.
Not allowed unless there's a project on. They have to get special sign slips to bring their phone to school.
Amazing.
Yes, but the writing, Julie, the writing is very different these days, especially in Papua New Guinea as well, and I believe it happens in Australia and the other Pacific Islands. Kids these days, they don't know their backgrounds really well. Like I was brought up in the village. I can write in between 2 times, from now and how I was brought up, like sitting around village bonfires and just listening. And I connect the 2 times together, you see, and make up like stories for short stories. But kids these days, they know nothing about their, their background, even in Papua New Guinea, especially in Port Moresby, like maybe in the village schools, they do remember. But I teach at a school where it's like an international school where we have other ethnic people coming to the school, but I'm just going to speak about the Papua New Guinean students. Most of them from the highlands, they know their roots really well. They can really write about where they come from, but their writing interest is different these days. So when I try to make them write, I have to find what they are interested in. Yeah. Yes, and then they kind of, it keeps them, it makes them write.
Do you mean that they're more impacted by international media and films and images that are, out of Walt Disney or mass-produced from Hollywood, or is that the kind of problem?
Yes, that's what I believe. They are so influenced by...
It's type of an intellectual colonialism, really, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah. Now, you mentioned that there's so much legacy, I can honestly tell, legacy of colonialism in Papua New Guinea. And I've seen it everywhere. Like the kids who are born now, like in the language and literature textbook in Papua New Guinea, it mentions a lot of poems that were written by Papua New Guineans back then in the 70s, hitting colonialism in the face. But we don't do it these days. But the kids think that it's already passed, but it's still there, it's hanging there, and they don't even bother about it. No. That's one of the things. And they are more worried about what to write about now. It's more influenced by films, this anime things that are happening now. So when we ask them to write, this is all we get. In their writing. They do not write about the people who were into it back then.
I think it's a real danger for cultures, and not just indigenous cultures either, that they lose their kind of cultural integrity by this kind of mass commercialization. I've seen my young grandson, who's 8, I said to his mother, it's his birthday, what kind of card he wants? She said, he'll only want a Marvel card, Marvel characters. And I'm like, really? I mean, really? And an Americanization even in his language. And it really saddens me, but I love him and I don't see him very often, so I'm not going to be critical. I sent him the Marvel card, but yes, and I think it's a worry, because we'll all be homogenized, It's like going over here to the shopping centre here. I went with Rebecca, and we're like, everything looks the same, that it's all made in China, and it's all all the same, and none of the little shops making something unique from here. Anyway, I'm off the point. So where are you now with your teaching? Are you a school principal or something, or you planning to keep writing, or writing and teaching, or are you going to give away teaching and concentrate on writing?
I'll just get to the point. I'm going to give away teaching in a few years' time, maybe a year time. I want to get into my writing. Writing is my passion. I just, because my kids are all grown, I just want to write. And I want to finish up my novels, and then I want to get to know the, like people in the Pacific who are really interested in bringing books out there as well, and like collaborating with them to get our stories told. Yeah, so the school I work at is really interested in writing as well. But as I said, are we going to touch on this book?
Sure, please, let's talk about it. Yep.
Yes.
And Anna, you'll tell us when time's up, won't you?
Oh, we're past time, but I don't care.
Okay.
We'd love to hear about your book.
Yeah.
So, sorry, I went on a bit about what I've been doing, but this is the book that got me here. Apart from this book, I'll just say I published self-published 3 youngsters' stories like this ones here, and then 2 short story books with 21 stories in them. I'm widely published in anthologies in Papua New Guinea as well as Samoa. As well, Tuisitala short stories, I got shortlisted like maybe 3 times. Yeah, I just love writing in the Pacific and connecting with everyone. But this is the group that really drew me into, like, there's so many other groups, and this is what that kind of pulled me. I really want to know what, to connect with all the other Pacific writers. So what happens at our school is that we run a writing competition at school every year, and I'm in charge of it. I'm in charge of the arts department at school, so I'm in charge of the writing, and it's called Anis writing. Anis in Papua New Guinea, Tokpisin means, those ants, they can't stop working, they just keep on working. So it's called the Anis writing. And then like every year we have to come up with a prompt, like to help the kids to form their stories. So it's been a struggle in the previous years, like they try to get them to write, but they don't want to write. So when I joined them, I decided to give prompts that they like. So just to get them writing. So this is a collection of 2020, 2020, 2021, and 22 stories that I collected from the school on the prompts that I put out to write, for the kids to write, for the students to write. And stories from grade 7, grade 8, grade 9, grade 10, 11, and 12. So throughout the years, I collected and I edited, I compiled very long journey, but I put my heart into it, and then I worked around them, hard copies, soft copies at the same time. I work really well with hard copies, soft copies. So anyway, I edited, typed them all if they were not typed properly. I didn't change anything at all, just grammar. So, and then after that, I had to send it to an editor in Melbourne. And this was an Australian who used to work in Papua New Guinea. He was a teacher for like more than 30 years in Papua. He's about 75. And his name is Ed Brumby, and he has been mentoring me as well, and he's been really helpful. He should be here right now, but he's in Europe. Yeah, I invited him to come, but he's in Europe right now. So I collected them. He did the second read. He brought them back to me, and I finalized everything with Jordan. Jordan is the one who helps me with publication online as well. And then we got it published, and it's been out there, and I think it's one of the first in PNG as well, like school compiling anthologies and publishing them at this time.
Wonderful. Thank you. Well, Marlene, it's been beautiful to suddenly be interviewing you, which I wasn't expecting to do. What an extraordinary woman, and aren't we lucky to have her here today? So